Hey guys, it's me again. This morning I was doing my devotional and I was reading a passage and read from the book that I'm currently reading out of that I just really felt led to share with you because it spoke to me. It brought peace and a sense of comfort to my life, and my hope is that it will do the same for you. I'm going to be reading a little bit from the book, so that's why my eyes are not focused solely on the camera. But the story that I read comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, verse 35, and it is a story of Jesus and the disciples in the storm. So the verse begins with, "When evening had come, he said to them, 'Let us cross over to the other side.' Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was. And other little boats were also with him, and a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?' Then he arose and rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, 'Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?' And they feared exceedingly, and said to one another, 'Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him?'" So, an important fact to understand about this is that the disciples were professional fishermen. This was their job, this was their livelihood, so I would wager to bet that they had seen a storm or two in their lives, but for whatever reason this storm had them freaked out. They were sure they were going to die, they were scared out of their mind, and yet Jesus was in the back of the boat asleep. I think it's important to understand the intent in this message is to think that Jesus is preaching from a place of rest, that he's telling us that when the storm of life comes, that he is not overwhelmed. He is at peace about the situation, and he wants to provide comfort and rest for us as well. The first thing to remember is that just because you are a believer, just because you have a relationship with Christ, that doesn't mean that storms aren't going to happen. Storms are going to happen. Bad things happen all the time. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. It's just the circumstances of life, and we are never promised a happy life. You are never promised happiness forever. So that is not the point of being a Jesus follower, is to have an easy life. Storms are going to come no matter what. Sometimes storm comes and sometimes you might not get wet, other times you might get drenched. And I definitely feel like right now a lot of us feel like we are drenched with this pandemic that is happening. We feel overwhelmed by everything that is going on in the world, but just because we're wet, maybe we feel soaked to the bone, that does not mean that we're sinking. We are not drowning. Our heads are still above water, so God is not intimidated by us being drenched to the bone. He is not intimidated by our feelings of overwhelmness. He is there. He's in the boat. He's got this. You're not going down. It's just important to remember the difference between being sunk and being a little wet. And he is always happy to help in situations, to bring you to the other side. He's always there to help you find comfort in the storm. Even right now in this situation, this is not something, possibly the person who ate a bat, I don't know who is to blame for all of this, but this situation is not something that we caused. But even when you are in situations that you might have caused from bad judgment or poor decisions, it doesn't matter. God is there, and he is willing to pull you up and to get you to the other side safely. Because the storm is never the point. The wind and the waves are never the point. Jesus is the point, and he is there to get you where you gotta go and to get you through what you are going through, and he is calm and he is in control. The next point is, I like to think that the disciples were on the boat and they were scrambling and they were freaking out and they were yelling and they were paddling their little hearts out, probably rolling their eyes because Jesus is sleeping in the back while they're about to drown. And when they did finally wake him up, I imagine that they probably expected him to be just as panicked as they were, to pick up an oar and start freaking out and screaming. but that's not what he did. I know a lot of times in my own life, when things get crazy, that's what I think God is going to do. I think he's going to realize my circumstance, and he's up there biting his nails, pacing back and forth, trying to figure out what the outcome is going to be, what's going to happen next, waiting to see what happens with me. But that's not the case. That's not who he is. He's not surprised. He's not frantically looking for an answer. He already knows all about the circumstances, and he's not overwhelmed by them. That's an important part of the story, is that he's not overwhelmed. Finally, when the disciples do wake Jesus up, he tells the wind and the waves to be still, and it stops. They're silent. The disciples, they look at Jesus, and they go on to say, who is this man who talks to storms? And they listen. Who is this man that tells the wind and the waves to do something, and they obey him? The Bible uses the term feared excessively, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were scared of God. It means that they were in awe of what they had just witnessed. Their jaws were on the floor. They could not believe what they just saw happen. And I'm sure they were a little bit embarrassed that they were freaking out. And, the Lord just stands up, tells everything to calm down, and they realize that they were really never in any danger, because the Lord can't sink. That's not who he is. He isn't going to accidentally drown in some water that he created. Wind and waves are nothing compared to him. The next point that I wanted to talk about is that it is so easy to be in awe of Jesus after the storm has passed, but the whole point of this message is that he wants us to be in awe when the storm is happening, when you are in the midst of the chaos. He wants you to know that he commands the sea and the waves and the wind, and they obey him. A funny part that is in my book says, "Who can this be that even the wind and the sea cannot wake him?" They should have looked at Jesus' calm demeanor and realized that he had everything under control, even when the storm was raging. The word awe refers to an overwhelming sense of wonder and admiration produced by something powerful. When we are in awe of something, we revere and fear it. In life, it's almost as if storms seek to sway us and to steal our awe. They want to garner our reverence, and they attempt to convince us of their power. And that was the problem with the disciples. They were in awe of the storm. They were captivated by it, even though Jesus was so near to them. They looked at the elements, and they trusted their five senses. They saw the storm. They heard the storm. They felt the storm. And their senses were telling them that they're going down. This is it. This is the end. And I know that I have been there, and I'm sure you all have been there as well. And I'm not saying that we should ignore reality. Bad circumstances happen, but we shouldn't ignore reality, but instead pay attention to a greater reality, and that is that Jesus is with us, and he is totally unfazed by our circumstances. That things that rock our boats or rock our world, they don't faze him. He is in the storm with us. He will never leave us, will never forsake us, and his promises are true, and his love does not fail. Now, another part was the disciples asked Jesus, "Don't you care that we are about to die?" They criticized him because he refused to be upset, to get panicky, and to worry. And sometimes that happens with us too, when things are happening, and we're taking it like a champ. People look at us and think, "Well, don't you even care? Don't you even understand like what is happening? You don't understand what's going on in the world. Don't you see the potential for a loss and destruction, especially with all this COVID-19 going on?" And yeah, they just want you to care. They just want you to care more. But what they are really meaning is they want you to be biting your nails, to be stressing, to be pacing back and forth, to have anxiety, to complain, to sweat more. That's what they want from you. And they think if you're not visibly worried, then you're either dumb or you're crazy. But that's not the way. The Lord God says that I like the way they put it in this book. He says, the Bible says in Matthew that if you're short and you worry about it, you won't get any taller. If you're bald and you stress out about it, you aren't going to grow any more hair. In the same way, if your business is short on funds, worrying isn't going to help you make payroll. If your kids are going crazy, worrying isn't going to make them act any better. Worry is useless. It zaps you of your strength. It zaps you of your focus. It causes you to be awestruck and dumbfounded by your storms more than who silences the storm. Sorry, turning the page here. In these moments, especially now, all these things that you read on the news, all this stuff that is happening around us, it wants your attention. It wants your wonder. It wants your admiration. It's sitting there saying, look what I can do. Look at the power that I have. But there's only one way to resist all of that power, and that is to look at Jesus and to know that he can outrun any storm, that he can outwit any circumstance, that to know that you can't calm the storm, but he can, and he will. You can look to Jesus. You can look to him through the good and the bad. He'll be there when you're suffering. He will be there when nothing makes sense, when the world is too much, when things are too hard to bear. When choices are hard to make, he is the answer. Jesus will never let you sink. There are a lot of things in this world, particularly right now, COVID-19, but there are things, cancer, divorce, deaths, grief, bankruptcy, depression, all of these things can sometimes seem so powerful that there is no more hope, but there is nothing more powerful than Jesus and his love for you. So he ends the book saying, through it all, Jesus is asking us to look to him and to focus on him. He is nearby, he is in our boat, and he is at peace and rest because he is greater than the storm. Storms happen. I can't promise you that you won't get wet. I can't promise that you won't go through tough times, but I can promise you that Jesus is bigger than the storm, and he is with you. The storm will end, the wind will cease, the waves will stop, and Jesus will see you safely through to the other side. Please be encouraged by this. I'm trying not to get emotional because it's Easter weekend. It's a perfect weekend to just believe that with all of your heart, to know that God is there and he is unfazed by everything that is happening, and that he loves you so incredibly much, and that his love never fails. But I love all of you guys. I am praying for you, and I can't wait until we all get to be together again.